When we install the plugin, it has to be licensed. To do this, the UID code that we will have to send to SGSE to generate the license appears in this window. We can copy it to the clipboard and email it to SGSE. They will send a license-lick file that we will have to find in the plugin installation directory. By default, the directory is c:/program/milestone/MIP plugin/SPC When we locate the license-lick file with a valid license in the plugin directory, the management client interface tells us that the plugin has been successfully licensed and shows us the license information, the number of license panels, and if the license is a temporary demo version or not. To register a panel, we will go to the SPC Panel section. With the right button, we will click on Add New, and we will give it a name to identify it in the system. We will indicate the TCP port on which the plugin will listen to the incoming connection from the panel. We will establish the encryption key of 64 hexadecimal characters. We will enter a user with permissions on the panel to be able to gain access, import the configuration and interact with it, and finally, we will indicate the plugin, the number of expander keyboards that have been installed on the XBus. Once the plugin is configured, it will be necessary to configure the panel to communicate with Milestone using the FlexC protocol. To do this, we will create an ATP in the panel with the data of the server event and the parameters that we have just configured, IP address and listening port of the plugin. For correct operation, it is recommended that you configure the ATP interface as Category 5 Ethernet. Finally, we will enter the fixed encryption key that we have configured in the plugin. The plugin takes care of automatically generating partitions, zones, outputs, expanders and keyboards in Milestone as soon as it has the necessary information. The items that are created can be defined as the source of the intrusion events from the panel, and will allow us to represent the intrusion elements on a map. Once we have configured the panel and the elements have been created in Milestone, we can specify the type of detector associated with each zone. We can select between volumetric, magnetic contact, break glass sensor, panic button, or seismic detector. The type of the zone will determine the icon that will be displayed on the map when the zone is added. As we can see, the zones with the icon are displayed on the map depending on the type of zone selected: volumetric, magnetic contact, break glass sensor, panic button, or seismic detector. The plugin automatically creates the number of XBus keyboards and expanders that we have indicated when registering the panel. If we want the alerts from the bus to be associated with the corresponding elements in Milestone, it is necessary to configure the address they have on the XBus. The plugin incorporates a series of events related to the intrusion into Milestone's own battery of events. These events can be used to trigger rules to define alarms. When we create a rule by selecting the trigger event, a new group of SPC monitor events related to the intrusion panel appears. Here, we will have the Milestone events that the plugin is capable of generating corresponding to panel notifications. Among them, in addition to the intrusion alarms in the zones, we find technical panel alarms such as communication failure, bus failure, power failure, battery failure, etc. For example, with the alarm signal in an area, we can set a PTZ camera to a certain preset. In this way, intrusion events are fully integrated into the Milestone event logic. In the same way, we can define alarms based on the intrusion events that the plugin incorporates. The SPC Monitor Events group is created, where we can select any of the events. For example, with the alarm event in a zone, we can indicate that when this event occurs in any of the zones of the panel, an alarm is triggered in Milestone. In this simple way, we have the intrusion alarms of the SPC panels within Milestone. We can also define an alarm in Milestone based on a technical alert from the panel. For example, we could create an alarm in Milestone when the battery failure message is received from any panel. When defining an alarm, we can associate a camera with it. In this way, when an alarm is triggered in a certain area, for example, Zone 1, in Milestone we will have an associated video. In the Related Camera section, we select the camera associated with the zone, so that when an alarm occurs, we will have a preview of the video in the Smart Client interface. The plugin incorporates a series of actions that allow us to interact with the panel through the rules defined in Milestone. When we create a rule, we can define any Milestone event as its trigger event. The action that will take place when this rule is activated will allow us to interact directly with the intrusion panel. We can see how the plugin adds new actions that we can perform automatically when any event occurs in Milestone. We can arm and disarm the panel, silence it, activate alerts, arm and disarm a partition, change the inhibition or isolation status of a zone, restore it, and activate or deactivate the panel outputs. In this example, when the manual event demo event occurs, output 2 of expander 1 of the intrusion panel will be activated. The plugin also allows us to apply the Milestone user permissions on the different intrusion elements. Through the user roles or roles, we can define what permissions each user group has on the different intrusion elements configured in the system. Thus, we can indicate whether the users belonging to the role have read or management permissions on the different elements. If they have management permissions, they can activate or deactivate the outputs, work on the inhibition status of the zones, and arm or disarm partitions. This configuration can be done globally on all partitions, zones, or outputs of a certain panel, or individually on each of the zones, partitions, or outputs. In this case, the user could inhibit Zone 1, but not Zone 2. In the Smart Client, we can place the different elements of the intrusion panel on a map, as well as the panel itself. Once located on the map, we can interact with them using the right button, being able to arm and disarm the partitions, cancel or reset the zones, and activate or deactivate the outputs. To add intrusion elements to a map, we access the Smart Client configuration mode, and the elements that have been created in the configuration will appear in the Plugins menu. Partitions, zones, outputs, keyboards, and expanders. Adding them to the map will be as simple as dragging and dropping them. The icons on the map show us the state of the different elements. The green color indicates the state of rest. Interacting, for example, with partition 2, using the right mouse button we can arm it. When the partition is armed, the icon turns orange. In the same way, we can disarm the partition. The outputs show an open contact when they are in the inactive state, and when activated, the icon closes. The icons of the zones show us the type of sensor configured in the management client. They can represent a volumetric, a magnetic contact, a brake glass sensor, an anti-panic button, and a seismic detector. As in partitions, the green color indicates a state of rest. If there is a change in status in the zone and it goes into alarm, the color of the icon turns red. Other states are indicated with different colors. Blue means bypass zone. Orange, armed without alarm. Magenta implies tampering, and yellow, other problems. If we have defined an alarm in Milestone on a certain area, when an alarm occurs, in addition to the icon change, it will appear in the Milestone alarm list, and the characteristic red circle will also appear flashing around the item. Here, we can see how the defined alarm appears. The icon shows us the state of the zone, and the circle indicates that there is an alarm on this element in Milestone. When you close the Milestone alarm, the circle disappears, and when you reset the zone, the icon returns to its idle state. Other actions that we can carry out on intrusion elements are, in the case of zones, inhibit, disinhibit, isolate, de-isolate, or restore the zone. When isolating or inhibiting an area, the icon turns blue. If we want to operate on the entire panel, we can right-click on the panel icon and arm or disarm the system completely, set the time, accept existing alerts, or silence the sirens. The integration plugin for SPC panels in Milestone developed by SGSE, in addition to monitoring intrusion events and interacting with the panel, allows us to monitor the status of the different elements on the bus through the monitoring of expanders and keyboards. When configuring a panel in the plugin, we will indicate how many keyboards and how many expanders we have on the bus, and the plugin will create them automatically. To associate the events with the corresponding element, it will be necessary to manually assign the XBus address to each element. By default, items with consecutive addresses are created. We can also assign a name to the different elements in order to better identify them in the system. We can display these elements on the Smart Client maps, and in this way, we can quickly identify if an alarm has occurred in any of these elements. The different alerts that can occur on an element of the SPC XBus can be defined as alarms in Milestone. The alerts that the panel can send us are, among others, communication failure, tampering, power failure, battery failure, etc. If the alert that reaches us corresponds to a bus address, for which no item has been defined in Milestone, the alert will be associated with the panel itself.